Welcome back. President Trump says he's been 100% cleared by Bob Mueller. Now, again, as I said, not true. I want to quote from the Mueller report directly here as respects to the obstruction of justice. Quote, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. Well, many legal experts say Trump all but admitted it on the evening news during this interview with Lester Holt of NBC.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
Well, joining us now to discuss that and so much more from our Federal Prosecutor Ronald Riopelle. Roland, I was surprised. I don't know what I expected to hear, but I thought that there was so many moving parts, such a terrific prosecutorial crew that was attached to it, the questions, the people that they brought in, the subpoenas they issued, between the financial records and just even what we saw in public view as it relates to Russia. I thought there would have been a there. Are you surprised at the end of the day, no conspiracy, no collusion?
You know, Richard, I think like most people who voted against Mr. Trump and have been watching the Mueller probe closely, it is a little bit of a head scratcher. There were so many contacts with Russia by the Trump campaign, and there was such strange behavior by Mr. Trump over time, so many sort of tidbits of evidence that seemed to indicate there was some improper relationship between Mr. Trump and Russia. I was very surprised that there wasn't a charge against someone relating to collusion with Russia, but I don't think there's any doubt that Mr. Mueller and his team did everything they could to determine whether such a charge was appropriate. They subpoenaed, hundreds of people, examined millions of pages of records very likely, and it's just not there. So go figure.
You mentioned, Roland.
I do think the explanation for why there was so much contact. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you talk about the subpoenas, but one of the questions for me.
So much contact and all that is. Go ahead.
Why not subpoena the president directly? To me, Roland, I always assumed the president avoided it, but right out there, he never subpoenaed the president, which we talked at length about. He was the nightmare client for any defense attorney because you knew he couldn't go through a sit down without lying.
Yeah. I suspect the answer to that will be in the Mueller report, and it may be as simple as, Mueller was advised by Rudy Giuliani that the president would assert his Fifth Amendment right, as every citizen has a right to do, and if so, it's improper to subpoena a target to the grand jury, and that would effectively take away Mr. Mueller's subpoena power. It could be that simple. I am surprised that there wasn't a subpoena, but one explanation, and the simplest explanation, is that the president asserted his Fifth Amendment right. But who knows? We'll find out when we get to see more of the Mueller report.
I thought, Roland, it was the stated mission on the part of Mueller to resolve the two outstanding questions as it relates to the conspiracies charge, which he gave a definitive answer to, that there wasn't enough to actually charge, but also on the obstruction of justice. In his at least response to it, and again, we're only getting the top line, no, not enough to criminally charge him, but not enough to exonerate him. That's a punt. And to me, I didn't think Mueller's job was to punt it to Congress. I thought he was supposed to decide.
Well, he was, but apparently he felt it was such a close call, based on all the information he had, that he simply could not resolve this issue in either way. He could not say, I can exonerate the president here, and he could not say, I feel the president must be charged here. So the evidence was apparently Mr. Mueller's view in equipoise, but that being so, he did make sure to say that he did not feel he could exonerate the president here. That's another indication, I think, that the president may have asserted a Fifth Amendment right in response to Mr. Mueller's request for questions and answers. And if that's right, again, this isn't a criminal case where you can't draw a negative inference from the assertion of the Fifth Amendment. If there was such an assertion, Mr. Mueller could draw a negative inference in his report, but he might not feel in that case, you could not, under the law, return a criminal charge based on the assertion of the Fifth Amendment. That may be the explanation for why we are where we are. Only when we see the Mueller report will we know for sure.
And I want to get to the report in a second, but it seems at first blush that I was wrong about a bunch of things, but I was wrong about two things. One was that they apparently were such a gang who couldn't shoot straight that I thought that that would have led them to being so unsophisticated here that they would have stumbled into a whole host of criminal activity in what they were attempting to do. But it seems that the ineptness actually served them well because they weren't able to carry out, assuming the intent was there, some form of illegal enterprise, one. And two is, when the president goes on the air with Lester Holt and says that he basically fired Comey because he wanted the Russia thing to go away, when he goes and does that obsequious roadshow in Helsinki, and he's trying to set up private lines, Jared Kushner and him, and kicks out everyone but the interpreter, I figured, my God, this is in public view what he's doing. But it seems, if you read between the lines from Mueller, that because it was in public view, he wasn't trying to be surreptitious about it. And in some bizarro world, being open about what you're doing kind of almost excuses it in a bizarre way if you're a president.
Yeah, I think there's some appeal to that argument that he didn't obstruct justice because it's so out in the open and it wasn't behind anybody's back. On the other hand, when he says, my intent was to bring an end to this investigation, it sure seems like that ought to be proof enough right there. And on the third hand, Richard, you're absolutely right. What all of the evidence demonstrates more than anything else is just the total incompetence of the people around Mr. Trump and Mr. Trump himself. Nobody but an incompetent would make a statement like that on national TV. And perhaps that's ultimately the inference to be drawn, is that we have a bunch of incompetents, but not a bunch of criminals. There's a difference. There
is. Let me rattle through three quick questions. First off, you believe at the end of the day we're going to see the full report? A lot of Republicans are coming out and saying, just put it out there. Even the president says sure, even though he hasn't seen the whole thing.
Yes, I think we'll see a great deal of the report. I think there will be some classified material in the report that we shouldn't see and won't see. I think there may be some grand jury material that we shouldn't see and won't see. I do think if there's classified material that is excised from the report, there are members of Congress, the Gang of Eight, who can see that, and they should see that. I think we will see much of the report, most of the report, and we'll see enough, I think, to draw further inferences about Mr. Mueller's investigation and why he reached the conclusions that he did.
Finally, real quickly, Roland, there are active probes going on right now. What happens to them? And also, do you think the president follows through with his maybe veiled threat of pardons here? Do you think, Manafort and Stone actually get pardoned out of this?
I think that the other probes that are ongoing of the Trump Foundation, the Trump Inaugural Committee, and all the rest, those will keep going. There's no reason they should stop. They are still in the middle of being investigated. And I do think the chances that Stone and Manafort will be pardoned have gone up now because there is less potential political damage to Trump if he pardons those two. He can say this was all a witch hunt, it didn't come to anything, and these poor men are swept up in something that they shouldn't have been because there was nothing there to begin with. A pardon, of course, will irritate people like you and me no end, but to Trump's base, which appears to be the only thing he cares about, won't seem unusual, strange, or off-putting at all. So I think the chances that pardons do come down have gone up.
Bizarre times we live in. Roland, my friend, thank you for the time, as always.
Okay, good to be with you, Richard.
Now, when we come back, we'll get the political perspective. Several House committees, they are probing the Trump administration, even the Trump family. The Powerful Oversight Committee, one of them, a key man of that panel. He'll join us after this break.